بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الحمد لله نستعينه ونستهديه ونستغفره ونتوب إليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهدي الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن سيدنا محمدا عبده ورسوله بلغ الرسالة وأدى الأمانة ونصح للأمة وجاهد في الله حق جهاده حتى أتاه اليقين. أما بعد فإن أصدق الحديث كلام الله وخير الهدي هدي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وشر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار. أما بعد يقول الله في كتابه الكريم بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم والسماء ذات البروج واليوم الموعود وشاهد ومشهود قتل أصحاب الأخدود النار ذات الوقود إذ هم عليها قعود وهم على ما يفعلون بالمؤمنين شهود وما نقموا منهم إلا أن يؤمنوا بالله العزيز الحميد الذي له ملك السماوات والأرض والله على كل شيء شهيد. إن الذين فتنوا المؤمنين والمؤمنات ثم لم يتوبوا فلهم عذاب جهنم ولهم عذاب الحريق. إن الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات لهم جنات تجري من تحتها الأنهار ذلك الفوز الكبير. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. While they were beating me, I cried out, Ya Allah. And this made them beat me even worse, mockingly saying, Go find your God. This was part of the witness, the evidence given by Mrs. Zumrat Dawat in the Westminster Tribunal about the Uyghurs very recently. They were investigating allegations of genocide, concentration camps, forced labor, hair and organ donation and harvesting from live people, forced separation of children from their parents, forced sterilization, forced labor, rape, burning of mosques, burning of the Quran, atheist indoctrination camps, amongst many other allegations. And some of the very brave ladies from the Uyghurs were giving evidence about that. So what I will attempt to do today is to just introduce some information about who the Uyghurs are, what is East Turkestan, which is the country, why are they being persecuted, and what is the relation between all this and the ayat I just recited. And more importantly, why should we bother? It's the other end of the world. And if we do bother, what can we do? So these are all questions that need to be answered. I don't claim to have the answers. I'm just going to highlight some points. And then it's up to each and every one of us to do their own homework to try and find out more. So let's start with East Turkestan. Because if you look on many of the maps today, you will not see a country called East Turkestan. East Turkestan is a Muslim country that has a very important geographical location, as it's got borders with 8 other countries, with Kashmir, India, Pakistan, Kazakhstan, Mongolia, China, Kurdistan, Tajikistan, and Afghanistan, and hence its importance location. And for those of us who may wonder, what is the story with all these Stan countries. Stan just means the country of. So Turkestan means the country of the Turks. And some may ask, Turks, are we talking about Turkey? And what has Turkey got to do with East Turkestan? No, the Turks is not referring to Turkey, this modern day Turkey. The Turks are tribes that have immigrated to many countries thousands of years ago. And they inhabited East Turkestan thousands and thousands of years ago before Christ. And hence the country became called Turkestan. Now, the importance of Turkestan, as I said, because of its geographical location, it was the axis of the Silk Route. And the Chinese were the people who manufactured silk many, many years ago. And it was one of the main sources of the income. And they had to transport it to all the world, because the rich and the famous in the world wanted the Chinese silk. And it had to pass through the Silk Route. And hence the importance of Turkestan as being the main route for this part of the Silk Route. However, that's not the only thing. Allah has endowed a lot of blessings to this country. It's got a lot of natural riches. It's got a lot of fertile lands. It's got a lot of natural beauty. Turkestan's area is 1.8 million square meters. That's 1,800,000 square meters. Just to put this in perspective, the UK's area is 242,000 square meters. So Turkestan is actually many times larger than the UK. So when we talk about East Turkestan, we're not talking about a small country. We're talking about geographically quite a big country. Now, what about the Uyghurs? The people, the inhabitants of Turkestan. As I said, the Uyghurs were Turk tribes that moved to Turkestan many, many years ago. In the year 96 of Hijrah, Qutayba ibn Muslim opened Turkestan, and all the population became Muslims, and they became very devout Muslims. And this continues to be the case up till today. However, this posed a threat to the Silk Route, and hence the trouble started between China and East Turkestan over the years. There were many, many wars fought between the Uyghurs and the Chinese. And the Chinese occupied East Turkestan, and then the Uyghurs managed to free their country many, many times over the history. And when we talk about that, we talk about hundreds of thousands of lives that were lost in these wars. However, lately, oil and gas were discovered in East Turkestan, and hence it even became more important. In 1931, there was a revolt by the Uyghurs in East Turkestan, and East Turkestan achieved its freedom. Unfortunately, this freedom lasted only for 2 years, where China, with the help of the USSR then, the Soviet Union, managed to reoccupy it. Until 1939, when the World War II was there, they achieved their freedom again. And 1944, East Turkestan Republic was declared. Unfortunately, this only lasted for 5 years, and it was reoccupied again. But on this occasion, it was not just an occupation. On this occasion, China was determined to change the geography and the demography. And on this occasion, it actually annexed East Turkestan and called it the Xinjiang province of China, which means the new borders of China. So on this occasion, it wasn't just an occupation, it was an annexation. It executed 120,000 Muslims, imprisoned 3 million, forced repatriation of Uyghurs to China, and instead they were repatriating the Hans, who are originally Chinese, into the country. The whole idea was to change the demography. The whole idea was to extinct the identity of the country. They set up concentration camps, which they call in the media rehabilitation camps. Children were separated from their parents so that they don't learn the religion or the culture. Any Islamic signs such as hijab or mosques or prayers or fasting in Ramadan became illegal. Anybody who tried to practice that was punished quite severely. They demolished hundreds or thousands of mosques of great historical importance. They forced Muslims to consume pork and drink alcohol. And whoever didn't follow was punished quite severely or just disappeared off the face of the earth. The population of East Turkestan is 35 million. However, China claims it's only 15 million. They installed monitored cameras everywhere, and every person who lives there is forced to have a tracking device on his mobile phone so that they can snoop on him, find out exactly what they're doing, where they go, where they come. And anybody who is seen to be practicing religion or even suspected of being practicing religion ends up with severe punishment. So the idea is to demolish the identity. And they've decided that the best way to demolish the identity is through demolishing the religion. So it became a war against Islam. So what is the relationship between this and the ayat that I recited from Surah Al-Buruj? Now, Surah Al-Buruj is a long story that Prophet Muhammad ﷺ narrated. We haven't got time to go through it all, but I'll just highlight one scene, the final scene, where there was a king who claimed divinity. And there was a whole population that were believers, who were believers. So they dug a deep trench, started a very big fire in the trench, and they brought all the believers one at a time, stood them at the edge of the trench, and asked, "Who is your God?" And if they did not answer that the king is the God, they would throw them into the hellfire, into the fire that they had started there. And one after one of the believers who were stood there all insisted that Allah was the God. And they were all burned to death. Amongst these was a lady who had a newborn child. And when she stood there and the question was posed to her, she hesitated a bit because she was worried about her child. And this is where Allah made the child talk and tell her mother, "We are on the right path." And she was thrown into the hellfire, into the fire with her child. So if we go back to the ayat, in this surah there was an ayah that says, وَمَا نَقَوْمُ مِنْهُمْ إِلَّا أَنْ يُؤْمِنُوا بِاللَّهِ الْعَزِيزِ الْحَمِيدِ. And they resented them not except because they believed in Allah, exalted in His might and praiseworthy. Can we see the similarities here? The Uyghurs are being persecuted for their belief. However, it's not all sad story, because Allah says in the same surah, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ فَتَنُوا الْمُؤْمِنِينَ وَالْمُؤْمِنَاتِ ثُمَّ لَمْ يَتُوبُوا فَلَهُمْ عَذَابُ جَهَنَّمَ وَلَهُمْ عَذَابُ الْحَرِيقِ. Those who have tested the Muslims and the believers will go to hellfire for eternity. إن الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات لهم جنات تجري من تحتها الأنهار ذلك الفوز الكبير. Whereas the believers who are steadfast on the belief will go to heaven and for eternity. And this is the great prize that they will get. So although on the surface of it, when we look at things, it is very sad that these people are being persecuted and maybe even killed. However, on the long run, they will be the winners. Allah tells us in the Quran, أم حسبتم أن تدخلوا الجنة ولما يأتيكم مثل الذين من قبلكم مستهم البأساء والضراء وزلزلوا حتى يقول الرسول والذين آمنوا معه متى نصر الله ألا إن نصر الله قريب. Have you thought that you are going to go to heaven that easily without being tested like those before you have been tested? In another part in the Quran it says, أم حسبتم أن تدخلوا الجنة ولما يعلم الله الذين جاهدوا منكم ويعلم الصابرين. Have you thought that you are going to go to Jannah, or you're going to achieve Jannah, while you haven't proved to Allah those of you who have strived in Allah's ways, and those of you who have been steadfast in the belief? So these are all fitan, these are all tests. Allah tells us also in the Quran, وَمَا هَذِهِ الْحَيَاةُ الدُّنْيَا إِلَّا لَعْبٌ وَلَهْوٌ وَإِنَّ الدَّارَ الْآخِرَةَ لِهِيَ الْحَيَوَانُ لَوْ كَانُوا يَعْلَمُونَ. This life is all games and fun, but the real life is the hereafter, if they only know. Many ayats in the Quran talk about this. And also in the Sunnah, the hadith of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam that says, لو كانت الدنيا تعدل جناح بعوضة ما سقى الله كافر منها شربة ماء. If this world meant even the equivalent of the wing of the smallest insect, Allah wouldn't even allow any of the disbelievers, the unbelievers, to have one drink of water. So what do all these things tell us? All these things tell us one thing, that these things happen for a reason. And it is not the first time it happens in history, it's happened before. And Allah explains to us why these tribulations are brought over, why these tests are brought over. However, the important thing is that these tests are not only for the Uyghurs or for our brothers and sisters in Kashmir or in Palestine. These tests are for all of us, and I'll explain that later on. So, question might arise, why should we bother? It's not our problem. We live here in Europe, we're secure, we're free to do our prayers, we're free to believe any way we want. Now, let's refer back to the Quran and see what Allah tells us. In Surah Al-Anbiya, Allah says, إِنَّ هَذِهِ أُمَّتَكُمْ أُمَّةً وَاحِدَةً وَأَنَا رَبُّكُمْ فَاعْبُدُونَ. This ummah is just one ummah. We are all one ummah, all Muslims, wherever they are, in Africa, in Asia, black, white, we are all one single ummah. And Allah is our God, so we all worship Allah. In Surah Al-Mu'minun, Allah says, يَا أَيُّهَا الرُّسُلُ كُلُوا مِنَ الطَّيِّبَاتِ وَاعْمَلُوا صَالِحًا إِنِّي بِمَا تَعْمَلُونَ عَلِيمٌ وَأَنَّ هَذِهِ أُمَّتَكُمْ أُمَّةً وَاحِدَةً وَأَنَا رَبُّكُمْ فَاتَّقُونَ. Same thing again. This ummah is one ummah. It is a single ummah. And I am your God. So beware of it. In the hadith, Prophet Muhammad says that the believers in their mutual kindness and compassion and sympathy are just like a single body. If one part of the body suffers, if a limb suffers, the whole body should respond to it with insomnia and fever. So we are all just like one body. We are just one part of this body. We are like a finger or a hand or an arm in a big body that stretches across the whole of the world. That's how we should feel about it. Also in the hadith, Prophet told us, "Al-mu'min lil-mu'min kal-bunyan yashuddu ba'duhu ba'dan wa shabbaka bayna asabi'i." He says that the believer to another believer should be like a building that supports each other. So we should support each other. We should support every single person in our ummah because we are one ummah. Many, many more ahadith which I had prepared, but unfortunately we seem to be running short of time. So I will just end my first khutbah with the dua that Prophet Muhammad said when he was forced out of Ta'if. When the disbelievers in Ta'if, he went to call for them to become Muslims, and they sent their children throwing stones at him. Where he says, "Allahumma ilayka ashfu a'fa quwwati wa qillat hilati wa hamani ala an-nas ya arhamar rahimin. Anta rabbul mustad'afin wa anta rabbi." Oh Allah, I appeal to you for my weakness and my limited power, and contempt and humiliation from people. Most merciful, you are the Lord of the oppressed, and you are my Lord. الحمد لله رب العالمين والعاقبة للمتقين ولا عدوان إلا على الظالمين وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن سيدنا محمدا عبده ورسوله. So we've touched very briefly on the question of the Uyghurs or the Uyghurs, who they are, what's East Turkestan, why are they being persecuted, why should we bother, and what sort of test it is for everybody. So as I said, these people are being tested quite severely. But as a matter of fact, we are all tested. And perhaps our test is harder than theirs. Because each and every one of us has a duty to find out what he or she can do to help her brothers and sisters. However, Allah tells us again in the Quran, لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا ما آتاها, that Allah charges a soul within its capacity. So each and every one of us should do what they can within their capacity. In another part of the Quran it says, لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها. Allah is not going to ask anybody to do what's beyond their scope. In another part in the Quran it says, وَلْيُنْفِقْ ذُو سَعَةٍ مِنْ سَعَةٍ وَمَنْ قُدِرَ عَلَيْهِ رِزْقَهُ فَلْيُنْفِقْ مِمَّا آتَاهُ اللَّهُ. It says, everybody should spend according to what they have. So if you are rich, you can spend a lot of money in the ways of charity and so on. However, if you are poor, you should still spend from what God has given you. And this means, this is a very serious meaning here, because it means that no one is excused from doing what they can, even if it is minimum. So what can we do? And the answer is, each and every one of us has to ask himself this question and find out what can be done. There are some suggestions, such as, for example, at least making this the story of the Uyghurs and what's happening there public. Contact your MP. Let people know about it. Talk about it. Discuss it with others. And there's one very strong weapon that we all have, which is dua. But dua does not mean just the ritual dua. Allahumma, 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 Allahumma. No. Dua should be from the heart. Whoever is doing dua should feel it in his heart and feel that he is talking directly to Allah. Some people have taken this further, and I have a lot of respect for them. I am not one of them, but I respect what they're doing. They have formed an organization called Support Islam 21C. They're arranging a march tomorrow, Saturday, to the China's London embassy, important place. If anybody wants to go, the nearest tube station, I think, is Great Portland Street or Regent's Park. And the campaign is called Stand for the Uyghurs campaign. As I said, I am not part of this organization. I know very little about them, but I respect what they're doing. At least they are trying their best. So let's try to do our best by doing dua, and let's try to make this dua from the heart. اللهم ارحم إخواننا المسلمين المستضعفين في كل مكان. اللهم فرج همهم. اللهم نفس كربهم. اللهم تولى أمرهم. اللهم اكبت عدوهم. اللهم وحد صفهم. اللهم ردهم إليك ردا جميلا. اللهم ادخل على قلوب المؤمنين السرور وفك أسر كل أسير واشفي كل مريض وفرج كل مكروب. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار وادخلنا الجنة مع الأبرار. وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين. عباد الله، إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون. فاذكروا الله يذكركم واستغفروه يغفر لكم وأقم الصلاة يرحمك الله.